go. Okay. We want to welcome you today to the 24-25 Annual Plan Application Training for IDEA, brought to you by the Office of Special Education Finance and Budget and the Office of Specialized Student Services and Office of Special Programs at the Department of Special Populations. So before we even get started today, we are going to do a poll. And this poll is to see how well we did engaging ourselves on what you learned, what you know now at the beginning of the session, and what you've learned at the end of the session. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. Okay, hopefully it will be on in just a minute. There are 9 questions and they're all multiple choice. We'll share the results as soon as we're done. So we will unmute everybody's voice at the end of the session. So thank you very much for letting us know. Okay, we have 100 participants in some of these answers. That's amazing. As we go on down, we'll get more. Okay. We have 20% now. We're down. Folk could take the time and make sure that they do this poll. We would really appreciate it. Just also let us know the things that we need to focus on during the presentation, not only now, but in the future. So I have just lost the poll. Can other people see it? Sammy, can you see the poll?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. For some reason, it's disappeared off my screen.
Still on mine. I don't know if everybody else
Oh.
has submitted.
Okay, I've got it back. So I have 58% of participants have responded. So if we can get up to about 75%, I would really appreciate it. So ladies and gentlemen, please get on and complete the poll, and then we'll share the results. We're at 61%. Okay, we're at 62%. Maybe we'll just go ahead and end the poll. But we do appreciate all of you who completed it. Oh, there we're at 65. Maybe some of the numbers just haven't come in on my screen yet. That was a jump. Okay. I'm going to end it at 110. My clock says 109 on my computer screen. Okay, the poll has ended. These are our results. As you can see, the first question, the correct answer for that is B. The only individuals who need to sign off and approve the application is the superintendent and the school board. It is advised that the Special Education Advisory Committee review it and you get their feedback, but it only needs to be certified and approved by the superintendent and the school board. So B is the correct answer. Number 2, LEAs with regional or local jails in its jurisdiction should submit. The answer is B, a copy of the most recent interagency agreement. And Lori will talk more about that. Number 3, the correct answer for number 3 is C. All the funds for 22-23 have to be expended and encumbered by September 30th, 2024. Number 4, the projected estimated budget amount for 24-25 for MOE, its answer is A. It must be more than what was spent at local and state funds in the most recent year the school division met the MOE. Question number 5. Coordinated early intervention services. Many of you got that correct, and it's all the above. So take heed that all of these answers are correct, and you need to be doing all of these with your CCEIS. Number 6, equitable services. Again, well, it's not A, that's actually DE. But it's all of the above, and we appreciate you looking at that typo and overcoming it because 78% of you got that correct. Thank you. Okay, number 7, completing section 611 and 619. The answer to that is F, all of the above. So take heed that every one of those needs to be completed. And number 8, 83 of you, 83% said yes, BDOE must approve prior travel, and that is correct for out of state and out of country. And number 9, we had some differences above this, and the answer to this is C. The curriculum materials for preschool classroom for children with IEPs. So only 29% of you got that right. So take notice of this, and when Dawn talks, she'll be talking about those results and what you can do with this money, because you obviously can't use it for A, B, D, or E. So that's it. At the end of the presentation, we'll do this again to see how you fared. Okay. Okey-dokey. So can you all see my screen? Says objective? Yes. Okay. Just nod for me. Okay. So we're going to go on and we're going to talk about we've divided the training into different sections, and under each section, there's specific information about that title. And our objective by doing this is making sure that everyone can get their application in at approval stage, and be able to be done with it and have it in a place where you don't have a lot of questions. And remember, we always want your questions before submission. If you don't remember anything else on this training, remember questions before submission. We
Hey,
look forward to hearing from you.
Hey,
So
Joanne, I'm not sure if I'm
section
the only.
1 will be about the application. Section 2, we will talk about
Joanne, you need to share your screen, please.
it's okay. I thought I was sharing. Okay. Is it shared now?
Yes.
Okay. Gee, I'm so sorry. There's a monkey in my computer today, and it decides to take over sometimes. So anyways, we have put the training into different sections as we have in the past years, and I'm not going to read all this to you, but in section 1, we do have a new section that folks have to complete this time in more of a narrative, and that is the GEPA reports. Lori will talk about section 2. Tracy will talk about reporting of the plan for last year. Then we got section 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then the updates. As you can see, it's pretty much everything that is in the application. So section 1, we're going to go over the purpose of the annual plan, the required components, and some planning points. We're going to look at the Excel workbook that you'll be using, and we'll look at the tabs, the welcome and instructions, cover and certification, LEA assurances, and the new GEPA section. Tracy Coleman, the director of the Office of Finance and Budget, who many of you know, will be talking about this section. So Tracy, we welcome you today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Federal Fiscal Year 2024 Annual Plan submission process. The application itself has been disseminated as of the end of November, 1st of December. We will be updating some of the tabs. So if you downloaded it already, go back to the section hopefully by tomorrow. We'll have an updated version. There's some cosmetic things that some of you brought to our attention where some of the text is not wrapping when you type multiple lines of information. within some of the content. So we will update that for you, but there aren't any major concerns, just some cosmetic issues. As you know, for some of you that are seasoned and those that may be new, the annual plan application and its purpose is basically for each school division to submit its application for funding in the coming school year. This particular application outlines your plan of action as well as include critical information around the implementation of federal and state laws and regulations that govern special education and student services. You're also required to include your federal unique identification or entity identifier. This information has been pre-populated. Please verify that. It's not often, but there are times where it may change. And if so, you'll need to make those revisions or at least make a comment about what your revised federal identifier may be. And according to the disbursements of federal funds, these funds can be used as they are appropriated to support students with disabilities, and is contingent upon approval of this particular plan in order for you to move forward with your spending. Next slide. Within the annual plan, there are various components. If you haven't done so already, when you get the application, make sure you enable the macros. This will not be the first time I say this. I will say this throughout the application. Some school divisions have issues with getting the different tabs to pre-populate. There are macros that have been embedded within the application where certain cells or at least sheets will appear based on the name of your school division once you select your division from the list. There's a superintendent certification page. I would say this is probably the #1 reason why an application gets denied. So please be sure to include the name of your superintendent and especially the date that the superintendent and the school board approve your plan. There's information about some assurances that you'll be making within the application. If you have not read in the past the instructions tab, that most of the time covers most of the questions that we receive from time to time. There's also an implementation tab that talks about how you are provides us with an overview of what you use the funding for. Please don't forget to also mention any funding that you use under Section 619. What we frequently receive is what school divisions have implemented under 611, but some divisions has a tendency to forget about the 619 section of your application. There's a maintenance of effort eligibility requirement under this section, not the compliance that's currently due January 31st, shameless plug. Coordinated early intervening services deals with those divisions that may volunteer or are required to set aside, as well as proportionate set aside, and a description of how you plan to utilize your 611 and 619 funds. Next slide. As mentioned before, there's lots of information that most school divisions will jump right in and start filling out your application without taking a look at your assurances. Most of your school division superintendents are relying on the special education team to let them know that we are or you are actually complying with federal regulations. And all of these regulations and the various links to many are embedded within the application should you need to seek additional information or guidance on certain requirements under state and federal reg. The 24-25 annual plan application was released on November 30 as part of the superintendent's newsletter communication. Please mark your calendars. It is due on May 10th, meaning it should be submitted and approved by your level 4 reviewer in Omega. State-operated programs applications are due to be submitted to Denise Laws. I think the application currently says Lori Cooper. If you inadvertently submit it to Lori, Lori will ensure that it gets to the rightful hands. The SEAC, the state SEAC committee meeting is scheduled for March, which is why the state-operated programs applications are due on February 16th. So we will have time to review request any revisions that may be needed to the application, and it needs to get included in a packet for review by the state Special Education Advisory Committee. If you haven't scheduled meetings, please be sure to meet with any key personnel within your finance, instruction, and the superintendent's office in order to review your budget. Now is a great time to do that as you are planning for next year. Most school divisions may have had meetings already discussing the budgets for the upcoming year, and you want to make sure that special education is included in those discussions. If you don't already have access to SSWS, please do so. You'll also need to ensure you have access to the online management, which is Omega, Online Management of Education Grant Awards application within SSWS. Your local SSWS administrator should be able to give you access to SSWS and give you, I guess, rewrites to Omega, but there is a form that you'll need to complete so that when you submit your application well before the May 10th due date, you will have the access required in order for you to move forward. Next slide. This particular slide provides you with an overview of the tabs that you'll need to complete. As mentioned earlier, you will definitely need to ensure that you can run macros. If you run into issues, typically that deals with the firewall within your local school district, and you can contact your technology department in order to provide assistance with ensuring that the application will work. The tabs will pre-populate. If you are a state-operated program, you will see different tabs that pre-populate for those state-operated programs. The one that you see before you relates to the tabs that will pre-populate based on local school divisions and the information that we will need from each of you in order for us to finalize and approve a successful annual plan submission. Next slide. In order to pre-populate, be sure to access or ensure that you enable any macros. You will select your school division from the drop-down menu. There, you will have to put your cursor within the box, and once you put your cursor on the box, you will then just select your particular division, and the macros will allow you not to have to enter the name of your division on certain pages. It will pre-populate your UEI number within the application itself so that we won't have those errors that may occur as a result of a typographical error or an oversight. Next slide. Again, the instructions page is there for you. It includes helpful information. There's also a print queue. Many of you may print your application for review to include in your school board, for review by your local school division, school board. And it only prints those critical pages. So if you use to print annual plan macro that's embedded within the application, it will exclude pages such as your instructions page and some other page that may not be necessary for the school board to review. As a friendly reminder, please be sure to include the annual plan itself in your meetings with the local school board so that they will have the content of your application in its entirety. We have found instances where this has not happened in some school divisions. Some school divisions have created PowerPoint slides, but have not shared a copy of the application that includes all the regulatory references and assurances that your division will be attesting to. So it's really important that you share this information with your local school board and with your superintendent. When you are completing your information, you can use this particular tab to identify who some of the key contact persons are. It also includes links. If you notice in the blue highlighted area, it includes links to Part B regulations. It also includes links to the state policies and procedures for special education, along with other critical or key information that you may need to have access to. It includes a budget development guidance. It includes information on how you should gain or can gain access to Omega with the various links. And it also provides you with information about how to actually complete your application. Next slide. The Career and Certifications tab. As mentioned before, there are two boxes that has a tendency to be overlooked from time to time. Those two boxes are the dates of the superintendent's approval and the school board's approval. Some of the information on this application is pre-populated. So once you select your name from the drop-down menu on the welcome page, the name of your school division will be pre-populated along with the UEI number. What will not be pre-populated is information about who do we need to contact should we have any questions. So please be sure to include that information within your application, because we do reach out, and we typically reach out during the summer period. So if you're a person that's completing this application that may not be working during the summer, please provide us with an alternative person to contact so that we can get your application through the review and approval process as quickly as we can. Please be sure to retain a signed copy of your annual plan with a wet signature locally. We do not need for you to send us a copy of the application with a wet signature, since we will accept the approval of your application electronically via Omega. But be sure to retain a signed copy of your application locally for audit purposes, as we will ask for it if you are lucky enough to get an on-site monitoring review letter and we ask you for a copy of your application. Next slide. The LEA Assurances and Certification tab. This section actually includes the new GEPA. For those that have been around for a little while, that has done this for a number of years, in the past, you've been able to only certify and attest that there aren't any barriers to accessing of special education programs. However, recent changes at the federal level now require us to seek and receive additional information around GEPA, and we'll go through that in greater detail, or at least an overview of it as part of this presentation. I will encourage you to look at the resources that we will provide to you so that you can learn more about what makes a good GEPA statement and what will allow you to submit it and hopefully get it approved. Next slide. As part of the U.S. Code, school divisions are required to provide a narrative, and there are 4 questions that are now embedded within the application. Those questions include a description of your school division's existing mission, policies, or commitments to ensure equitable access to and equitable participation in the proposed project or activity. Yes, you will have to provide information. On file is not a valid answer. Question number 2, based on your proposed project or activity, what barriers may impede equitable access and participation of students, educators, or other beneficiaries? And based on your barriers identified, what steps will you take to address such barriers to equitable access and participation in the proposed project or activity? And number 4, what is your timeline, including targeted milestones for addressing these identified barriers? This is a requirement for all programs seeking funding through the federal government. This particular requirement is also a requirement under that the Virginia Department of Education also has to complete. So our GEPA statement is actually published on the website under the special education webpage under the grants and funding. So if you need to, I would like to review what Virginia has included in last year's application, which is actually current year application for IDEA, that particular GAPA statement is available for public view. Next slide. The statute highlights 6 types of barriers, but it's not inclusive. It can impede, that may impede equitable access or participation in the program. Those 6 barriers include gender, color, race, disability, national origin, and age. As a reminder, again, this is part of the U.S. Code. LEAs must determine whether these or other barriers may prevent students, teachers, or etc. from access or participation in the IDEA program, projects, or activities. Next slide. This particular PowerPoint, along with the recording, will be shared with you via email at a later date. The PowerPoint will have links embedded that will take you to the U.S. Department of, to allow for training on what is equitable opportunities under GEPA. This particular program is no different than what you may be required to do if you receive other title programs or title funds under Title I. Special education now is receiving additional information as part of its application, similar to all other federal programs. The course is only about 30 minutes, and you can start it and stop it as you need to. And it gives you a really good description of what the Section 427 of the GEPA law pertains to, its purpose, what are the 6 types of barriers, and other things, and the barriers that may inhibit access. Please recognize that you are required to complete this section of the application. Next slide.
Okay, Tracy, thank you very much. That was so much information that I'm certainly glad that we're recording this and we'll be able to offer all of our individuals in the field a copy of the PowerPoint and the links to that. So thank you very much. Next, we have section 2 talking about special education in local and regional jails. And let me introduce you to Lori Cooper, who is a specialist in this area. Lori is with us for the first time this year. So welcome, Lori. We really appreciate you stepping up and taking this on. And so Lori, I'm gonna let you say a little bit about yourself to the field and go forward.
Thank you, Joanne and Tracy. Happy to be here. I'm currently the SOP specialist at the Virginia Department of Education, so overseeing the academic programs in Virginia's juvenile detention centers, state mental health facilities, and state teaching hospitals and associated Virginia Department of Health clinics. And so with Ellen's retirement, there was a little bit of transition at the department. And so I'll now be working additionally with local and regional jails. So kind of similar to our juvenile detention centers, but when it comes to instruction and FAPE, kind of different. So if you happen to have both in your locality, feel free to give me a call or an email and kind of, you know, if you want to walk through those differences or what's going on in one program or another program, I'm very happy to talk to you about that and excited to work with Tracy and her team and Dr. Burnett and her team as well. So this part of the application is not going to apply to every school division in the Commonwealth. This is only applicable if within your division there is located a local or regional adult jail. So within the confines, the boundaries, the parameters of your school division, if there is an adult jail, then your division does have a responsibility to identify those students who are still receiving special education and related services and providing those services. So this is just one part of the application. And again, if it applies to you because there is a jail in your jurisdiction, then you are responsible for completing this. Just to know if you've been in this role for a while or you've worked with a jail program for a while, I will be working this spring to update the budget documents and update the data collection. And then I'll be offering some technical assistance through a webinar or Zoom call as well. Just kind of want to update those to maybe be more in line with some other documents that you're used to seeing from VDOE and to kind of help streamline things for your finance folks. So looking more at maybe doing some spreadsheets as opposed to handwriting on forms and making things a little bit more efficient. So that's some news to come. The most important thing to remember that if you are going to request funding for these programs, that we must have on file at the department a copy of the most recent interagency agreement. That is an agreement between the school division and the sheriff or the jail administrator. So that's the agreement that you two entities kind of hash out and sign. Those don't have to be updated every year, but we need to have the most recent one on file at the department. So anytime your division and your sheriff or jail administrator update that document, we need to have that on file. So we need to have the most recent one. As I've been collecting them for this school year, we have some that are almost 10 years old and we have some that are just a couple of months old. So while there's no timeline on how often those have to be updated, we do have to have one in place, and then we need a copy of the most recent one. And that interagency agreement, there's not a standard form. They have some of the same standard language across what you would expect in an MOU, but what you have to be sure that it's included in there is staffing and security issues related to the provision of special education and related services in the jail. And it is recommended you update those annually, but that is a strong recommendation. As I said, we have some that have been in place for almost 10 years. And then again, if you in your contact at the local or regional jail update that, just be sure to give us a copy. And Joanne, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. That was very informative, Lori, and we look forward to working with you. So our next section is on the report of the implementation of the 22-23 plan. And I believe we have Tracy up again. Tracy?
Hi, guys. Again, this is the implementation of your 2022-2023 annual plan. I will take this opportunity to provide an additional shameless plug. We have funding still available for many school divisions that have not been drawn down at the state level. I'm not quite sure if you have already expended your grant from last year. But if you have, please work with your finance team to ensure they submit your reimbursement requests. Unfortunately, this past year, over $6 million was returned to the U.S. Treasury as a result of school divisions not submitting or using their IDEA regular or IDEA ARP funding over the past 2 years. Please do not wait until the last minute to expend your funds, and if you need to seek pre-approval for uses, please reach out as soon as you can so that we can get that through our review process as quickly as we can. One of the things that we'll be looking for under the implementation narrative is an overview of what your division has done in which to expend funds for the 22-23 application cycle. And that's true, not just for the 611 section of the application, but also under the 619 section of the application. If you are required to set aside funds for CEIS, please be sure, or even if you volunteer, please be sure to cover that as well, as far as what you, basically a snippet of an overview of what you use the funding to support within your district. Next slide.
So section 4, we're going to switch again, and I'd like to introduce for the first time today, Shalonda Lewis, and she will be talking about maintenance of effort.
Good afternoon, everyone. Everyone who knows me, this is one of my favorite subjects, maintenance of effort. And I want to make sure that everyone on the call is aware that we have 2 components to maintenance of effort, one being eligibility, which is on the tab, which is our topic for today, and compliance. And I want to make sure that you all are aware that the compliance portion, the LEAs, all of you are in the process of doing that right now. And that's through the MOE application, making sure that you have spent at least the same amount in local plus state funds as you spend at least the same amount or greater as you spent in the year that you last met. So that is the compliance, and that's what we're doing right now. However, we're looking to the future. We're talking about budgeting, and we need to make sure that you also budget the same amount or more the last time that as you reference your last MOE, which is showing how much you spent, okay? So let me say that again. Make sure that you budget or plan for the upcoming 2024-25 the same amount or more, making sure that you have expended in the most recent prior year. Okay. So not to confuse you more, but what I want to make sure you reference is that you have to look back to your most recent MOE submission to make sure that you spent your budgeting enough or more. It should not be equal for 24-25. If you take the 22-23, and that is what we're doing, MOE submission, that's an SSWS and MOE application, and submit it on your budget page for MOE, it will be returned, because that is very rare that it will be the exact same amount. You need to reference that 22-23 submission to make sure that your budget is equal or greater. More than likely, it should be greater, because it's very rare that someone would have the exact same budget amount that they had the year prior. And in this case, the prior year is 22-23, because that's the most recent year that we have available. Now, the second thing I want to make sure I point out to you is often the MOE is returned because the per capita calculation is not correct, because divisions have used the incorrect per capita child count amount. So what we have done is we've created a report, and that report is located in the December 1 membership application, and it's called the Maintenance of Effort Report. So if you log in, check to see that your division should have a report, and it should give you your CSA and your MOE child count amount. And that is the amount, the child count number that you should use to calculate your per capita. We want to make sure that we were trying to make sure that we don't have as many returned for that reason, and hope you find this report a great asset. However, I will let you know that I checked the report on Friday. It looked like it might have had a little maintenance going on to it. So give it a couple of days, check. If you check today and it doesn't seem like it's proper, and give it a couple of days and check back, because I think it was going through a little maintenance. All righty. Next slide, Joanne. And I just want to remind you that you do not have to meet every test for the budgeting of MOE. Just like for the compliance, you don't have to meet all the tests. You only need to meet one. So again, they should not be the exact numbers. If they are the exact numbers, just make sure you're able to explain that to us. Otherwise, you only need to meet one test. And let me know if you have any questions. I'm always available to answer questions. All right, thanks.
So our next section is section 5, and it's about coordinated early intervening services and comprehensive coordinated early intervening services. And we're going to introduce Joseph Warb for the first time, and we want to congratulate Joe. He is now the Director of Behavioral Health and Wellness for the department. Joe, welcome and congratulations, and we'll take it away.
Wow, thanks, Joanne. Appreciate that so much. I get to talk to you a little bit about CCEIS and CIS, very long acronyms, to be able to talk a little bit about whether your division either has been, it's mandatory that you set aside funds, 611 and 619 funds to address significant disproportionality, or whether you want to do that voluntarily. And so I'll just say, if you are a part of Comprehensive Coordinated Early Intervening Services, that's a CCEIS, you already know who you are, because we've already been in touch with you. You received a letter back in September or October to your superintendent from Jeff Fennessy's office to kind of explain to you that you have a significant disproportionality in an area or areas, identification, placement, discipline in a certain area, that is going to require you to create a plan and submit that plan to the department. That's going to address that disproportionality and show us that you've got a team kind of assembled to be able to look at this, that you've looked at your data, that you've been able to see and look at some of the potential root causes around this disproportionality, that you've been able to kind of set some realistic goals to be able to try to address those significant areas, that you have your team together, and that you have evidence-based practices in place, and that you're monitoring your progress. And so that plan is going to follow you through the year in the hopes that in the end, you'll get off the list, but more importantly, that you're going to be able to serve your students in a better way. So I am part of a team, a big team here at the department, many of which who are on this actual webinar today that kind of deal with this. You're also going to hear the name Joanna Scott probably within the next year. I'm not sure if she's on the webinar today or not, but she's going to be kind of taking over some of the things that I've been doing in the last year or so. But we have a full team here to be able to assist you in getting to this plan, to be able to see it, to be able to get through it. And so let's talk about it. The next 6-7 slides or so, we'll talk about it and be able to decipher the difference between these two, starting with what is the difference here between CCEIS and CEIS when you get to that tab in the state plan. Yeah, actually, if you don't mind going back, still, Joanna, thanks though. If you can step back there, one. And I just wanted to show you here at the bottom here where it says in the second bullet, the differences between these two. Comprehensive, so CCEIS, again, those of you who are required to set aside that exactly 15% of those IDEA 611, 619 funds, know who you are. Again, you receive the letter. We've actually met with you, or most of you hopefully, for kind of an initial training, and we'll have another training here in March, a workshop that I'll talk about in just a second. And then coordinated early intervening services, so CEIS, are for those of you who want to potentially put some up to 15% of those IDEA 611 and 619 funds aside to be able to address some areas that may become disproportionate in that area. So thanks. Next slide, please. So there are specific areas, and we'll talk a little bit about, we've got Tracy here, who is our money person, about to whom and how these CCEIS funds are spent. I'll talk a little bit about that in a couple slides from now, but basically all the funds that are being spent are really addressing that area of significant disproportionality, and you must be able to show that in that specific plan that you send us. Next slide, please. So I want to take just a second on the CEIS. Again, I've said already that CCEIS, you know who you are. Why would you want to set aside CEIS funds? Why would you want to voluntarily set aside funds? Well, your division, you may be seeing in your data when you sit down with your team that you're looking at some areas that, you know what, we need a little bit of potentially some assistance in a certain area that may rise to a level of disproportionality. And so we're going to set aside those funds, and we're going to do this plan to be able to do that. That's basically what CEIS is. It's just voluntarily setting that aside that money and doing a plan for that. And this is for students, and there's differences between CCEIS and CEIS. For CEIS, provided to students in kindergarten through 12th grade, with an emphasis really on those earlier grades to be able to show that. Because what we're trying to do here is put additional supports in place so that students aren't identified as needing special education related services when those specific additional supports would have succeeded in getting them and keeping them in the general education environment. So that's CEIS. Next slide, please. So allowable uses of funds for either CEIS or CCEIS, and these are fairly similar when we start to look at the allowable funds. Universal screening is not allowed. That's one of the main things that's not allowed. But what is allowed, what is usable funds and allowable funds include professional development for teachers and school staff. That's typically a big one. Being able to look at scientifically based specific any kind of to be able to assist students in their academic and behavioral interventions, but also you're able to actually set aside funds here for specific positions that are going to be able to assist specifically in the disproportionality area that you were looking at. So you're able to hire for funds for some personnel on this as well. Next slide, please. So let's look at differences here again with CCEIS and CEIS. So for CCEIS, there's 11 divisions for this year, for instance. Know that they have to set exactly 15% of those IDEA Part B funds towards looking and addressing that specific area of disproportionality. And when we say exactly 15% here, this is exactly 15% to the penny. You have to spend all those funds. Now that when you first do your plan, you may not have exactly what that 15% is, but Tracy will get to you that. We'll get you that information as quickly as we can. And by the time that you get your plan approved for CCEIS, it will be exactly to the penny 15% of those IDEA Part B funds. Now for CCEIS, you can use it for general and special education activities. That's not the case for CEIS, which again, I'll talk about in just a second. But you can use some of these funds for special education activities, but not exclusively for that. Some of these have to be used on the general education activities as well. In both of the areas, regardless, you're going to see where as you create your plan, you cannot supplant money that's existing already for specific services around this, right? You can supplement, but you cannot supplant those monies that are being used for this CCEIS or CEIS. And again, this is going to support ages 3 through 12. As you remember before, and I'll say it again in a minute, CEIS is kindergarten through 12. We are able to put activities in place for age 3, so PK through 12 in this area. Next slide, please. So CEIS, your voluntary, includes using up to 15%, whereas CCEIS has to be exactly. You can use up to 15% of those funds to do CEIS Part B funds. These have to be for general education activities. Again, there's the supplement, not supplant clause that's there to make sure that we're using those funds properly. And this is for kindergarten through 12. Again, this is CEIS for voluntary. Next slide, please. So when you get to this tab, the CCEIS and CEIS tab in the state plan, and 1A, if you're required to set it aside, you simply put a yes in there. Again, we've got the names of all, I think it's 11 of the divisions who are required. So I know that you're going to have a yes in there. For those who want to voluntarily set aside up to 15% of those CEIS funds, then you'll do 1B. And you can see, I believe that's Joanne there circling the 1B square. So that's where you'll put that information there to be able to voluntarily set that aside. Just for, I think, I'm just going to make a guess here, but I think voluntary setting aside CEIS, I would say probably 6, 7 divisions do that now, maybe 8 or so. But again, a good practice to get into as you're starting to look at your data and preparing for the following year. Next tab, please. Slide. So if you mark yes in either one of those, we'd like to get a preliminary budget. That's going to be on the next page after you put in whether you're going to set those aside or not, or you've been required to set it aside. That preliminary budget, again, just what it says. You'll probably have a more accurate budget as you move forward and get into the final submission and the final approval, which will happen sometime probably in the summer of this year. Next slide, please. Hi there. Great, so we have a workbook to assist you in this, to be able to assist you in this work that kind of walks you through every piece of the CCEIS plan. Those of you who are required to set it aside, that workbook is going to be sent to you very soon. We are putting some revisions into it, and that should be complete literally probably within the next week, so we'll be sending those to you as well. After I start to look at each of these state plans and after you submit those, and I realize how many have set aside CEIS or plan to set aside CEIS funds for voluntarily putting those funds aside, I will then send that workbook to you at that time. There are also training modules which I'll send a link when I send you the workbook to be able to walk through these modules. Great stuff done through our VTSS folks who are able to put these training modules together to be able to walk you through each and every section of this and do it well. So yeah, and then we've got a actual workshop that's going to be, we're going to be able to put to have you come to have an actual day of work where you can bring your team in and you can start to work or finish the work on your plan. That's going to happen on March 18th of 2024. So if you'd like to put that date down now, you can. More information will be coming out, more specifics on hotel accommodations and things like that. We will pay you for your travel. Basically, what this is doing is we will do some training in that, but most of the time during this time, on March 18th, is going to be spent with you working with your team. Please have a team in order to do this plan. One person's not able to do this plan. You need a team, multidisciplinary type team, to be able to put this together with all those sections and areas that I just mentioned when I started on the very first slide. Being able to have that team to be able to look at the root cause and be able to put a plan together that's going to really address it and be able to move the needle in the right direction. That team should be present, I hope, with us on March 18th to be able to work through that. We'll have plenty of EDOE people there to walk around, answer questions, but you'll be able to specifically work with your team. So any questions on anything around technical assistance or information on training modules, you can contact myself or Joanna Scott. Her contact information is right there. So I think that's it, Joanne. Next slide, please.
It is.
Yes.
And
Again, any other questions at all, please let me know. And we are here and available, again, myself and a full team to help you through this process.
And I apologize, the chat box is now enabled for everybody, so anybody can ask their questions in there now. And we're moving on to section 6, which is equitable services, proportionate set aside. And I want to reintroduce to you Shalonda Lewis. Shalonda?
Hello, I'm back. Thanks, Joanne. So for the divisions that have parentally placed private school children, you're required to set aside funds for these students. There is in the section, the TPSA CEIS tab, there's a question that asks, is your school required to set aside funds? And we need for you to answer that yes or no. And then in the narrative section below, we ask you to share with us your plans for those students. Last year, we sent back quite a few applications addressing that we needed more information versus just saying related services. When you fill that out, if you know the services that your division is able to provide, please list some of those services so we're clear, a little more clear on how you're going to use those funds. So if you want to prevent that from being returned, that would be a great help to us if you could be a lot more detailed versus just saying in general related services. That would be helpful, and then we won't have to bother you with additional questions. And then of course below it tells you to list the budget that you will need. Again, I want to make sure you know that you're not required to put all of the funds in 611 or 619, but we have to calculate it in total. Well, separately, excuse me. We have to calculate it separately, but you can't put all your funds in either 611 or 619. But when we do the calculation, it has to be separate. And that is what you just did in November. So let me say this. If you are preparing if you have to have a proportionate set aside, the information that goes in this section is not the information you just provided to me November of this year. This is a new calculation for, again, the future for 24-25. So then your question would be, Shalonda, how do I calculate for 24-25? Great question. Next slide, Joanne. We have a worksheet that you are more than happy to use, which is pretty much the calculation. And I give you information as to where you would pull the data from. And it's an estimate, but if you want to get as close as you can, this may be of assistance to you. If you would like to use this because you know your division will have to calculate proportionate set aside for your division for this upcoming school year, please let me know and I'll be more than happy to send you a copy of the template. It's pretty simple, but if you need any assistance, again, please let me know. That's all, Joanne. Thank you.
Okay. Questions before submission. We need to say that one more time. Questions before submission. So we're moving on to section 7. We're talking about section 611 and section 619 funds. And Tracy is going to kick us off. Tracy?
Good afternoon once again. We are now in the section of the application that pertains to the narrative related to how you plan to use your 611, which is your school age population funding within your school division. This section basically consists of 3 pages. The top of the page is for those divisions that actually submit joint applications, meaning you will combine the funding that you receive under 611 with another school division with either in your region or somewhere within the state, and you will operate as a jointly combined application or applicant for the funding. If this happens to be you, you will need to collaborate with that joint applicant to ensure that you identify the name of the division and the amount that will be reserved and pooled together to service students under 611. The names of the divisions are already included in drop-down options for you, so you don't have to type them. You just have to select the correct division for that you're partnering with, but also don't forget to select yourself as a participant in a joint application. I will say I have not worked with a division, or a division has not decided to pool funds for 611. That when we get to the 619 section, that's more common than not under 619. That has happened, but it's a bit different or unique, would be something new should we receive an application of a jointly combined 611 use of funds. But it is allowable for divisions to make that selection and to pool your funds. So this is what that section, or at least the top of the page, is for those school divisions. Next slide.
So we're going to turn it over to Dawn Hendricks, and Dawn is our program person for preschool, and Samantha Tansey will be our grants and financial assistant for preschool. So Dawn.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So Tracy just spent some time talking about 611. I'm going to talk about 619, remembering that 619 is for children ages 3 through 5. So these are our preschool funds, our early childhood special education funds. Tracy mentioned in her description of 611 that there might be an occasion when a school division is going to submit a joint application. As she noted, that's fairly rare for 611, but is more common, not common, but more common for 619. And I think the reason being just having a smaller number of children of this age, that sometimes pooling funds with another school division might make sense. So what you see here on this slide is that page for that occasion when you might submit a joint application. All right, thank you for that pointing out there, Joanne. Page 2 is going to include 2 narrative sections. One section is for personnel, one section is for non-personnel, and then finally there's a budget section. Now, all of these things have to match. So that seems to make sense, but you'd be surprised at how many times we have to return these because they do not. One of the suggestions that I'm going to make to you, and I'm going to make to you over and over again, do not put numbers in your narrative sections. That's what the budget section is for. If you put numbers in your narrative section, you have to be very, very careful to make sure all numbers match. And Sammy and I spend a lot of time making sure all those numbers match. And again, a lot of times they do not, just human error occurring as you're copying and pasting or whatever the case might be. So again, page 2, you're going to have 2 narrative sections. You're going to have a section on personnel. This is pretty straightforward, meaning that you might provide support for a teacher or a paraprofessional. Most of you probably know that your 619 funds are fairly sparse. So you are going to be using other funds to help provide your early childhood special education programming. The non-personnel, this is another area that we find that we need to provide a lot of information on. If you are buying materials or anything of that nature, you need to describe the nature of those materials. It was stated in a previous section, the more information you can provide us, the better. If you simply say we're purchasing materials, we are going to return it and ask you for clarification. So maybe you're providing funds for manipulatives or assessment materials. Put that in the description so that we know exactly how you're going to be using those funds. Okay, and then you see here the last bullet that you're going to use 8,000, the 8,000 object code if an item costs more than $5,000. So a note there. Next slide, Joanne. So a note for everyone to remember is, I said a second ago, your 619 funds are fairly sparse. You're likely going to need to use other funds, federal funds, state funds, local funds to provide your ECSE program. You can use 611 funds to support this age group of 3 through 5. Let me repeat that. You can use 611 funds to support children ages 3 through 5, but you cannot use 619 funds for K through 12. So please remember that. These funds are designed to be used to pay for the excess costs of providing special education and related services. One of the things to make clear is if you're using 619 funds, you need to be providing it only for children with disabilities. So let me give you an example that we see sometimes. Perhaps you're going to use 619 funds to support an administrative assistant. If that administrative assistant is doing work for the entire school or the entire special ed program, including K through 12, that's not just for children ages 3 through 5. That's how we have to use 619 funds. Another example might be you want to purchase curricula for classrooms, and the classrooms have 18 kids who are typically developing, but 2 kids with IEPs. That's not a good use of your 619 funds. The 619 funds must be used for ages 3 through 5 with IEPs. Next slide.
Okay, we're going to move on. Dawn, thank you so very much. You know, it's really nice to have you on board with your knowledge about 619 funds. It's those little people are so important to our education. They're the foundation. So thank you very much, Dawn. All right, so section 7, we're going to circle back around to Tracy. And she's going to talk about the responsibilities of the LEAs and the use of these funds and some of the frequently asked questions. Tracy, are you ready to get started again?
Thanks, Joanne, and thanks, Dawn. She reiterated some things that are true under 611 and 619, especially the part that relates to entering information in the narrative tab, meaning entering numbers under the narrative section of the application, and entering numbers under the budget section. A lot of times that is a common error under the 611 and 619 sections of the application that typically gets your application denied, and you'll have to make adjustments, which is a bit more time consuming for all parties involved to get it resubmitted in a timely fashion. So please be sure to pay special attention to that section, and also the pre-approval and inclusion of any costs that are greater than $5,000. This is a section where we get to remind you of some critical regulatory references as you move forward in your application. And this is true not just for your upcoming application year, but also for your current year and any funding that you have expended under IDEA. Please know that procurement mechanisms must conform to federal and state laws and standards. You don't know how many times we've received questions around whether, because the funds are federal funds, that they can preclude procurement policies within your locality. Simply because it's federally funded does not discount the fact that you must follow your local procurement procedures. And in your case, those procedures should be documented at the local level. Time and effort reporting is a common finding that we actually identify as part of the fiscal monitoring reviews. Time and effort is not new to federal programs, but for some reason, many of the school divisions have a tendency to believe that time and effort is only required under Title I, and that's simply not the case. Time and effort reports are required for all federally funded positions within your district, and that's true even if the positions are funded under IDEA regular, IDEA 619, even if you are required to set aside funds for CCEIS, if you're volunteering for CEIS, those funds do not lose its identity. They're still considered federal funds, and time and effort reports are required. Additional information and resources can be found if you use the link that's embedded within the PowerPoint that we will be sharing with you. Please be sure to maintain financial and programmatic records at the local level, which means if you're submitting a reimbursement for payroll and you're referencing payroll journals within your submission in Omega, we should have access to be able to review those payroll journals should and if we happen to show up and request documentation and evidence as proof of individuals being funded through special education IDEA funding. As a general rule, funds or things that are purchased under IDEA should be used to purchase or used to support Part B related activities. For example, if you're planning to purchase a curriculum, the curriculum that you're purchasing with IDEA funds should be used to support IDEA related activities and requirements. LEAs must maintain a physical inventory of any property that is purchased under IDEA. These include things such as iPads, computers, various other assistive technologies you may be purchasing within your school district, but we will expect to see some type of physical inventory listing of any and all items that are purchased. As a reminder, we are asking school divisions to include serial numbers when you submit your reimbursement request in Omega, and we will use that as a catalyst to confirm that what's been submitted in Omega and those serial numbers do agree with your inventory logs. And this is a section where fiscal and program should have some level of conversation and collaboration around the spending of funds, the supporting and uses of those funds, and what evidence may need to be retained locally should and if a fiscal monitoring revisit occur. Next slide. Grant funds are reimbursable. So if you have or your division have expended the funds, please submit reimbursements only after the goods and services are received. We are not allowed to pre-fund projects, meaning you are not to submit a reimbursement in advance of funds being used locally. In essence, the check number should be after the date of the reimbursement or before the date of reimbursement. So if you submit a reimbursement request for a future date, chances are the system will not allow you to submit that. And by error, if you try to fix it and in essence, make the corrections on your own, and there's evidence locally that does not support the fact that that the funds are being reimbursed after goods and services have been received and paid, that will typically lead to some type of audit finding and additional corrective action on your part. As a reminder, out-of-state and out-of-country travel must be approved by the Department of Education in advance. If the division chooses to travel and not seek pre-approval, please be prepared to find alternative funds in which to cover those costs. Because it is a federal requirement that you do seek any pre-approvals from the grant office in advance of the travel taking place. And as soon as you are aware of the event that you would like to travel to, please seek that pre-approval as far in advance as you can to allow sufficient time for us to review and provide feedback and to ask any questions if we should need clarifying information. And if not in your application, you've included kind of as a broad brush, I want to attend a conference in Phoenix, but you don't have the details around the cost, the specifics, just know that just because you put it in your application that I plan to attend a conference in Phoenix does not suffice as pre-approval, because there are other components that as an agency we must clarify and approve. That's also including that the item is 1, allowable, 2, reasonable, and 3, should be charged, meaning allocable under IDEA. Many times in the application process, sufficient information is not available for us to make that determination. So those are the types of things that we'll be looking for when you submit paperwork for pre-approvals, whether that's for travel or for any major purchases or changes to how you plan to use your funding. Next slide. You see this twice because it's one of those areas that school divisions have an aha moment and say, oh, I forgot. I did not get pre-approval for travel. Just a reminder, we do follow Virginia state government travel regulations, and many of Virginia state government travel regulations are duplicative or at least agree with the federal per diem rates, but there are specific state government travel regulations that are unique to Virginia. So embedded within the PowerPoint is a link that will take you to that particular regulatory section. Any equipment items that must be approved in advance that are over $5,000, please submit those to the department as well. Next slide. Prior to submissions, Joanne has consistently said, ask questions in advance of submission. Please ask questions in advance of submission. That way we can answer those questions in advance of you having to submit and then go through the process in Omega to get it denied in order for you to make those revisions. Make sure you review your application with the local special education advisory committee, and that you allow for sufficient time in your process to get your application reviewed by your local special ed advisory committee. Also, it must be reviewed and approved by your local school board. If you're a school division that has a school board that requires a first read before action is taken, given that your applications are due the first Friday in May or the second Friday in May, that means you will need to ensure that that second meeting for approval occurs in advance of that May due date. So if that means that your board meets after the due date doesn't change, we will make note in our records that your application was not submitted within the prescribed time frame. We try to communicate due dates well in advance of them occurring. So it is now January. So go ahead and convene and schedule your local special ed advisory committee meeting for their review of your application and ensure that you are on the school board's agenda for first read and for approval of your application within the established timelines. As a reminder, state operated programs do not have a local special education advisory committee. As a result, your applications are actually reviewed by the state special education advisory committee that will have its meeting on March 7th. Please submit your applications to Denise Laws or the SPED Finance email account no later than by February 16th. That date is getting really close. The state operated program application, upon its review, should then be submitted in Omega by the May 10th due date. The Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind is required to submit its application to its board for approval and then to the state board for review. They have a two-step process for the VSDB that's in Stanton. Please make sure your superintendent approved the application in advance, or at least in Omega, or the superintendent's designee. And as a reminder, the FAB team does not need a copy of your wet signature on the signed application. However, you should maintain a signed copy of your application at the local school division for audit purposes. Make sure someone other than yourself is aware of where to find this information. The reason why I'm saying that is there have been times where there is turnover at the local level, individuals retire, transition to different roles, or have other responsibilities. And if we show up or someone asks for a signed copy, they can't locate that signed copy. So it's critically important that you maintain those records and have them accessible or at a location where they can be found by someone other than yourself. Next slide. Now that you've gone through the application process, your application has been submitted and has already been approved. You're ready to start spending funds. Let's make sure you spend those funds in accordance with your approved application. If you have to make any major changes as far as programmatically to your application, for example, one reason is that I can think of is your school division volunteered to set aside funds for CEIS, or at least thought you wanted to, but you changed your mind. Something occurred, you no longer plan to set aside funds for CEIS. That's an example of a programmatic change at the local level that will require you to change your application and resubmit it in Omega. If it's simply a budget amendment, meaning, hey, I was planning to hire speech pathologists to serve students with disabilities. I'm unable to find speech pathologists under Object Code 1000. Instead, I'm needing to contract out in order to provide those services. So in essence, I want to change from using my funds under Object Code 1000 and now use it under Object Code 3000 for purchase professional services. Those amendments can be done through Omega by using the budget transfer/adjustment process. That does not require an amended IDEA application. Please be sure to submit timely reimbursement requests. We ask that you do them monthly, but no later than quarterly. Also, as an added jewel, we'll also ask you to separate, if at all possible, requests for reimbursements under personnel. So if you can do a reimbursement just for your personnel costs, that would allow us to get through those typically much more quicker than it does for us to review those requests for reimbursements for the widgets, meaning you typically have numerous lines of detail around the purchases for non-personnel related costs. I can't emphasize enough that you should maintain personnel records and that you should also maintain time and effort reports and other supporting documents around what is being paid through IDEA. It's been surprising to me that some divisions have not retained documents, and that causes some concerns around costs and questionable uses of funds. Next slide. These are some of our quick, I guess, frequently asked questions. These are questions that we typically receive. Should a copy of the covering certification worksheet be signed by the superintendent and submitted to VDEOE? I guess it's a two-part answer. No, the approval at level 4 serves as electronic signature for the purpose of applying for federal funds. However, a signed copy must be retained by the division. I think I've now said that at a minimum of 3 times, but we still get this question from time to time. So we are re-emphasizing it here. Next slide. Same thing with this question. Should the amount spent for each object code or type of service be recorded in the narrative section? The answer is no. A summary should include a general description of services that were implemented in accordance with the approved application. And that's true for section 611 and 619. We frequently receive information outlining how funds were used under section 611, but do not have information about how funds were used under section 619 for the smallest preschool students. Next slide. Under the CEIS proportionate set aside, are the amounts recorded the actual or required set aside amounts? The answer to that is no. The amounts recorded are an estimate based on the previous year's totals. If you know anything about the timing of federal funding, typically when you receive your application, you don't know what your award amounts will be. However, you have completed your application for the next year using a projected budget amount. So if you're using a projected budget amount and the child count data that's available now, thankfully, you can compute what the estimated amounts are. And that allows you to ideally reserve and plan what services you may make available to parentally placed private school children. Same thing is true for coordinated early intervening services. It's an estimate at this point. But as part of that estimated amount, we want to ensure that you are aware and adhere to the required amounts for CCEIS. It must equal exactly to the penny 15% of the allocated amount that you're using in your application. And that total is what you are entering under tab 611 and tab 619 added together and then multiplied by that 15%. That is your set aside amount. Please note that the budget amount and summary must be completed if yes has been selected on this particular tab within your application. If your division is required to set aside funds, we expect to see a yes under the required component. Next slide. Under the 611 and 619 tabs, should out-of-state travel be included if the destination and actual cost isn't known? The answer to that is yes. The anticipated conference and estimated costs should be recorded. However, the division will need to seek further pre-approvals as we will not have sufficient information to determine whether the attendance of such conference or training session is a reasonable cost to include under IDEA. So as a result, we'll need details about who will be attending, the costs associated with attending that particular conference or training session, and where those specific locations and actual costs are projected to be. Next slide. Instructions. Are the instructions for state citations, federal regulations available for user guidance? And the answer to that is yes. Instructions for completing the annual plan and other state, federal regulations and citations are included under the instructions worksheet within the application. It has lots of information available for you should you need it. Next slide.
Okay, it looks like we're completed the training session and we're back to seeing how much of it has been taught and what you have retained. So we're going to do the poll again, and I hope that everyone gets a chance to take it. And I'm going to put it up again. Okay. Give me a second here. Okay, hopefully it will be up. My partners in crime, let me know if it's up. I don't see any numbers coming on. So I'm a little concerned.
We can see it, Joanne.
Oh, okay, great. Maybe people are just taking a little bit of time to be a little more thoughtful about their answers. We have 13% of the participants are working on it. We've had some people drop off also. We now have 24 participants, and at one point we had close to 35 attendees. Okay, we have 13 of the 29 have answered. A little less than half. Okay, it's 2:35. I'm going to end this at 2:36. We have about 55% of the individuals have completed. So if you could complete the rest of this as soon as possible, so we don't, we've been at this for about an hour and a half now. So I know folks are getting a little tired and a little restless. But we really do appreciate you taking this poll for us, letting us know how well we did. Okay. I'm going to end the poll. We ended with 62%. Thank you very much. I'm going to share the results. Okay, so as you can see, we improved, and the correct answer for number 1 is B. More people got that correct. Remember that the Special Education Advisory Committee does not have to approve or certify the application. You share that with them to get their input, but there's no way that they have to approve it or certify it. So it's just B. Number 2, again, a copy of the most recent interagency agreement is correct. 83% of the people got that correct. Okay, number 3, let's move down here. Oh, I love this. So all the money from 22-23 has to be encumbered and spent by September 30th, 2024. So we don't want to send any money back to the USED. So be sure to get all of that money spent. Okay, question number 4 about maintenance of effort is A, correct, 76%. Number 5, all the above, fantastic, absolutely. Number 6, again, all of the above, I'm so proud of you all, what a great job. 7, again, all the above. Boy, we're going to have such great applications this year. Number 8, yes, 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 fantastic, 100%. And number 9, Dawn's going to be so happy. C is the correct answer. Oh, and so you only can spend money for preschool children. So there was significant improvement, and we really appreciate that. And thank you for giving us that feedback and taking the time to look at the application. So let me get back to the actual screen of the presentation. All right. So these are some regulations and resources from DOE and the state and federal government that can be really helpful for you. We want to let you know that there are dates to remember for the upcoming session. We will have a Q&A session for the application on February 21st at 2 p.m. and again on March 21st at 11 a.m. And in the assistant superintendent's email are the links for those Q&A sessions that you used to get to the training today. So here are some upcoming news and reminders. The excess costs, you'll be getting information about that in late March to get that in. And there'll be, again, a Q&A session and training. The CCEIS is due March 10th, the same as the annual application. The CEIS application workbook will be due before or by June 21st. Reminder that on January 31st, the MOE compliance submission window will close. Again, questions before submission. If you have any questions, please contact Shalonda. Tomorrow is the next MOE Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please join us tomorrow. Or as always, you could always call Shalonda and review the preliminary budget for MOE eligibility. Also, I just want to let you know some upcoming information that's not on our slide or reminders is that we're looking forward to in March to have a annual finance conference. It's a one-day conference that will include special ed directors in your team and finance department. So we're looking forward to that. You will be getting information about that and registration information about that within the next couple of weeks. And that's the second week of March, around March 14th. So put that on your calendars as a save the date. And there'll be more information coming forth. Also, the department has been working on a training for participant support cost, equitable services for PSA. And there will be modules coming out on that in the near future. Hopefully they'll be out in April. And they will be online and you'll be able to take those for recertification and use those also for professional development. You'll be able to use all the modules or one module at a time, but we look forward to getting your feedback on those and getting those out to you. We're always here to serve you and wanting to make as much information as available to you, but not overwhelm you also. So remember, the big statement for this session is question before submission. Question before submission, and that's true for everything that we do. So at this time, I want to say thank you, and we appreciate your attendance, and I'm going to shut the recording off and we can have discussion.